Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Today is December 1st, and this is LNM 3.
Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Good morning. So December 1st, and it's the AM class at 10:40 or thereabouts, and we are sort of finishing up the semester. I want to outline a few things of how we're going to the end. So we basically have 2 more weeks of regular lessons, this week and next week, and then I plan to do finals on the 15th. I haven't quite completely decided because a lot of my decisions on how to do the exams, the final exams, will depend on how things are unfolding in this week and the next. So I'll probably make a decision with you, ask what the best plan of action is, by the end of next week. I mean, there'll be Wednesday then, right? So I'm teaching Tuesday and Wednesday. So Tuesday next week will be your final regular lesson. And then we'll do private sessions as we need to, whoever needs that. But that's always been open, and some of you have done very well with that. So what I'm going to do today, I'm just going to outline what I expect you to know for the final. So basically, what we've done this semester has been dedicated to studying predominance, basically. And we started the semester by reviewing passing 6/4 chord and cadential 6/4 chord. And we also started by learning a little tonic expansion thing. That's the one that either involves the passing 6/4 chord or the 7 diminished in first inversion, what we call 7 diminished 6. The 6 again stands for first inversion. So those little tonic expansion operations there, when we pick up again in next semester, I'll show you how that is a model, yet another model that we can expand upon and understand how either 6/4 chord or what we call an applied dominant can work to expand a tonal function of a certain chord. They can actually be applied on all the scale degree levels except for scale degree 7. Scale degree 7 is a diminished triad, and therefore serves a function that cannot be tonicized, meaning that cannot serve as a function to be expanded upon, but that serves a function within a tonality. But all the other scale degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, can be elaborated that way. And that sort of principle we're going to explore next semester. But just tidying up a few things, what I need you to do, to be able to do, is the following. There will be 2 tiers to this exam. There'll be one in which you're filling in the inner voices. And then there'll be one where you're going to write out the entire progression just based on a set of analytical symbols. The 1, 7 diminished 6, 1, 6, predominant of some shape or form. Let's say it will be the Neapolitan, for instance, and then write out a full cadential 6/4 chord, a dominant 7 chord, and a tonic. I understand that some of you will not be able to do that, at least not competently. You may be struggling your way through and can produce some result in that. And for you, in order to pass the course, there will just be another level where you're filling in the inner voices, basically, where I would write out the bass line and the soprano line, and then you fill in the inner voices. That is a pure study in voice leading. But in fact, that would also provide you with a model for doing the entire thing. Some of you have had a hard time. Let me illustrate where I have certain problems. And I'm just gonna give an example of that because we have some time to do this right now. So for instance, if I have a little progression here in G major, notice the way I do it. I write out the bass line and then I write out the soprano line. And here we get to our predominant. This is the tonic with the little tonic expansion. It doesn't really matter how I fill in the inner voices. I mean, I would have to give some analytical symbols, and I'll do that in a moment. And then I'll do the same here again. And this one is separated thus. So here's an example in my favorite key of G major, because we can easily read it. If I were to fill that in, it would certainly be like this. And we can see already, and I remember in the homework, by the way, a lot of you didn't hand in your homework. The students who already done well in the course all handed it in. And then there was a great number of you who didn't hand it in, which is a pity, because it could have given a clear indication of where we might be in the progression. I was even kind enough to say scale degree 2 here. So all you have to do is to plug in scale degree 2. If we call this, for instance, at 265, then the inner voices are giving themselves, because you basically just have to fill in this one here. That's how the sort of passing level of the final exam is going to be. That one should cause nobody a problem, I think. But let me give you an example of, so let me fill in the tenor here as well. And the third part of the final exam would also be an analysis. I simply just want people to identify, have I used the passing 6/4 chord or the cadential 6/4, the passing 6/4 chord or the 7 diminished 6. So you have a 50-50 really, if you want to sort of run your chances there. It shouldn't be too hard to name one or the other. But obviously, and then this would also be up here again. Let me just fill this in. Like that. Okay, so here we have our entire progression written down. This was the problem I saw with many students in the homework, or snippets of homework that was sort of submitted, that most of you know that scale degree 4 is in the bass. So you plug in here scale degree 4, and then some people sort of say, some of the students said they ignored the scale degree 2, which is also, obviously meant for the soprano. But they simply started stacking, saying that, okay, this one here is an A minor 7 chord. Let's say they got that right. And then they simply just start stacking here. Here's the E, here's the G, and here's the A. I mean, sure, that's the right chord. That's what we did last semester, right? And that's what we reviewed in the beginning of the semester. This is basically back to some previous step. We have to apply this. I mean, this, if you're singing soprano, you can't all of a sudden skip down a ninth and sing out of the bass clef and then up again. It's obviously not the way to write things. I'm not interested in whether you can spell these triads or these 7th chord in this case. That is supposed to be completely under the hat by now. So if I write scale degree 2 up here, and I'm saying this, if you, let's say you handed in your homework and you had it perfect, as some of you do all the time, this is an opportunity for you to study what kind of problems you're going to come out to. You're going to come out to stackers, third stackers. That's what we call them. People are just never going to get out of that. They've been taught how to stack chords, 7th chords, triads, what have you, in thirds. I mean, you can see that this one here is obviously not in root position, because otherwise it would have been stacked in thirds, right? But we call them third stackers. They're never going to be able to write in a meaningful way so it can be sung. And therefore, they're field of operation is still back to where they were before they came to music school. Nobody's going to take your voice away from you. Nobody's going to take your chops. You know, if you have a bag of tricks, let's say you have a few licks that you can play, nobody's going to take that away from you. But here's the opportunity to really expand your professional field of operation. If you can write for voices, then you can arrange things and you can really expand your field of operation. So obviously stacking things, no matter if you stack them, let's say you stack them up here, that will be equally wrong because the basses cannot jump from this note. And I mean, it goes without saying that this is not the way that I'm looking for. I'm no longer looking for whether you can spell these chords or not. And still yesterday, I got a whole stack of chords from a student, most of them misspelled, right? Say, look, I'm working really hard. I know you're working really hard, but you're not working very smart because I'm not interested in that anymore. That is supposed to have been accomplished by the first month of study in this semester. That's the truth, right? So take these notes, connect them in the closest possible way. And this one here, and what else? Well, what am I missing here? A, C, E, and G, right? So the closest possible way would be this, and then E up here. Okay, so like that. Just do it in such a way that none of the inner voices are leaping. This is what I see all the time, for instance. Somebody starts stacking from the bottom. Do not start stacking from the bottom. If you place your E here, right, your G would have to do that. And I saw homework like that. This is leaping down, leaping up again. This is leaping way down because I need a G somehow, right? And then up again. This is obviously not the way to write for voice. Okay, so this is what not to do. And so if you get in this problem where you see that both inner voices are leaping, switch them around and it will work like a charm. That one is now carrying on. That one, oops. That one is moving up by a step, moving down by a step, and that's how it is. This is entirely sequential or conjoint, right? Or conjunct motion, meaning stepwise progression. The soprano is behaving the same way, etc., etc., etc. This is how to write the full progression in this key. If you see the inner voices leaping, both of them at the same time very often, switch them around. That's the cure for that. Do not try to make this look like a third. Okay, don't try to do this. You make this one a little bit smaller and this one here. Do not do this. This is not good notation. This is plonk notation and it doesn't work, and it's just not the way it's written out. They have to clash. You have to see that these two notes are next to each other. They are clashing. Therefore, you can see that they're bumping into each other. They're simply just sitting like this on top of each other. Okay, let me write out a new progression in a different key and show you the two ways that will constitute the writing part of the exam. Choose A major. This one is low, the stem is down because it's the bass. All the bass notes, no matter how low, no matter how high they are, have the stem pointing down. Okay, so let's say let's say I've written this out and I want you to fill in, actually, let's do an A minor, because I want you to also be able to handle the Neapolitan. It's not a big deal at all. So let's say this one is N6. Oops. Oh, 1 second. Then this is still to be filled in, but basically in these cases here, you're filling in the inner voices. How do you do that? Well, I'm going to give you, obviously, the analytical symbols here. A minor, right? So there'll be 1, lowercase 1. Let's choose a 7 diminished in first inversion and a 1/6 here. And C 6/4 or 8/6/4, whatever, 7/5/3, and then 1. Okay. So this much we need. This is the central piece, obviously. Fill in the gap. Fill in the gap. And you will notice, by the way, when you do that, you will notice that these will be in parallel 6. That the bass and the soprano are going in parallel 6th when they move on. That's perfectly fine. But how do we fill in the inner voices here? Anyone, let me ask you guys, how would you fill in the inner voices? And there's no reply. Okay, so I'm just gonna bulldoze through it, and I mean, just for the future, these are teaching moments. You got to grab them. And if you don't, that's fine, because I can do it. I save time by doing that. You analyze what this is. This is an A minor triad. You check what you have. You have an A. You have a C. So you need to place an E. And then you have to double the bass. So if I place the E here, you can see what happens. That as you move forward, you see all these inner voices jump and jump and jump. Right? They're leaping back and forth and sort of getting into each other's space. So therefore, place everything in close position. That means that I have to place another A. The E is not really, I mean, you can't write above this one. That's why you start by stemming them. I mean, I've stemmed them for you, but that's the work order. That's the work procedure. Stem them. That's the first thing you do. Because you know that nothing goes above this note. If there's no stem on it, you don't know if it's a soprano or an alto. You just don't know. So stem them. I mean, when you're writing everything out yourself, when I'm writing it for you and just ask you to fill in the inner voices, just do it in close position. Okay, the A is closer here, right? So now I've taken care of that. And then the E writes itself because it must be up here. So you have a choice now. You can either have a very low tenor, in which case these two are probably going to, you know, struggle at some point with spacing between them. So put the tenor high, put it around middle C-ish, in that region, either the 3rd or the 4th octave. This would have been fine, actually. It's just a low tenor, and if you've got plenty of tenors, then there's not a problem. There's not a balance problem. But in terms of writing, it's easier to do this. Then you analyze this one. You say this one here is a scale degree 7 chord in first inversion, and need a little more space there. And you say to yourself, what is scale degree 7 in the key of A minor? Well, it depends on what kind of minor scale we're talking about. So think of the minor mode for this purpose, for the purpose of harmonizing. Think of it as being the same as the major mode, meaning with a raised 6th and 7th scale degree. The only difference between major and minor for harmonic practice right now is the lowering of the 3rd scale degree. Think of it that way, because and I know that there's some people who would, particularly people who spin these things out over several semesters, they would say, oh, no, we have to teach that there's natural minor, there's Aeolian, which is the same thing, and then there's harmonic minor, there's melodic minor, and then there's jazz melodic minor. All of that. So it's 5 different scales, basically, that serve exactly the same purpose. They could all be summarized into saying, look, the 6th scale degree in a minor mode can be either up or down. It can either be raised or natural, or lower even, meaning flatted. So flat 6 is a very common procedure in the minor mode. And the same is true for the 7th scale degree. And they're sort of reflective of one another. If you raise the 7th scale degree to get the leading tone, very often, just for melodic purposes, you would also raise the 6th scale degree to get a more fluid and more natural harmonic progression. And that's all good. That's what we call melodic minor. And in jazz, the melodic minor is the same going up and going down. In more traditional theory, it is not. You go up one way, you go up with the raised scale degree, and you go down with the lowered scale degrees. And that makes it very confusing for the 2 worlds, because now students think that they're 2 different things, when in fact they're the same thing. It's not, you don't need a separate course called jazz theory to understand that some of these different modes are like the superloquian is generated. That's the 3rd mode of the melodic minor. And I understand very well how that is. You have a new repository of notes, and then from that you create new scales by starting on different scale degrees. That's all fine. I understand that very well. But it can be summarized in the following way. The only difference between major and minor is the lowering of the 3rd scale degree. That's it. From the 5th scale degree and up, in most musical practice, not for people who write papers and are getting a PhD and getting tenure at some university in jazz theory. I understand that you want to make this as complicated as possible, because thereby you can show off your incredible knowledge of the whole repertoire of jazz, etc., etc., and how that's so radically different from classical music, which of course it is not. But I understand that the need for, but that's not my end. I mean, I'm not looking for a PhD in jazz theory, and I'm just not interested in all that. I'm a performer, and if this makes my my job opportunities better for being able to perform music, I think that's kind of where we're coming at it. Most of the students in this school, we're sort of understanding that we just want to expand our field of operation. If you're a music minister in your church, you want to be able to arrange things so they're easy to rehearse and they sound good, and that people can actually sing them without being able to read too much music. So what I do here is that I understand that when I say scale degree 7, I understand that it's the raised leading tone scale degree 7. That will be G sharp then. So a lot of speech just to come to this point, but I want you to understand that in harmonic practice, we're talking about the leading tone. We're not talking about the natural 7th scale degree in natural minor or Aeolian or whatever you want to call it. We're talking about the leading tone. And here on top of that, you're building a diminished triad. There will be 2 minor thirds. This is a minor third, G sharp to A to B. That's a step and a half. And then a step and a half up from B to C, C to D. That's it. This one here is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for it in first inversion. That means I have to take this one and stick it up on top. This is now the chord that we see here. 7 diminished in first inversion. And I have B in the bass. And I also have B here, so the doubling is already taken care of. You don't have to worry about that really. So the B is already taken care of. I need to place a G sharp. And if I place it here, then I get into the problem that I'm going to leap, by a -6th or whatever. I mean, it's just not, it's not a good way to sing. So if you feel that you must build this up from the bass up, sing again, right, and the moment you have your bass line in place and your soprano line, then write down. I can't tell you the number of homework assignments I had that was just stacked up really only in the bass clef. That's heartbreaking. At this point, that's really heartbreaking, but as prospective, let's say grade school teachers in music, that's what you're going to come out to. If you're in a good, I mean, look, I'm not even joking. I went to, the Dalton School, and I watched some of the music education and they're doing this stuff in 5th grade, you know, because you can. I mean, it's not difficult, right? It's just that you have to pay attention. It's not that they can't be learned in adulthood. There's nothing difficult about this, but you must place such notes in close position. That would be the G sharp here then, you see? All the ones in the red are the things that you would do. And then a D. You see, now everything is lining up. Here, 1/6, we understand that's the same chord as this one here, just where the root, A, has been moved up on top. And the rule of thumb is in root position, double the bass. In first inversion, double the soprano. And then fill in the missing link here, like that. If I already filled in this one here, then it's easy, because you see, okay, in A, flat 2/6, I'm writing it deliberately as N6 because I need you to know. Otherwise, when you get to the other end at LNM5, if I've spoiled you all the way through and said, oh, what is the Neapolitan again? That's flat 2/6. Okay, so you can write it in for yourself if you want. Flat 2/6. So if regular 2 is B, then scale to be flat 2 is going to be this one here. And then you understand that it's a major triad in first inversion. Flat 2/6 is going to be a B flat major triad. That'll be this one. Major third, minor third on top of each other. It's going to be in first inversion, but do use this space here. Don't just think that you can nail it. Just do all the calculations right away. And you see, what have I? Okay, I have B flat. I've got the D, so I've got to place an F sharp. It's got to be somewhere, you know, it could, sorry, not F sharp, but F natural, right? It could be here. This is not an untoward leap, right? That'll be fine. And then you double the bass because you have to double, oops, that one. Let me just invert it because you have to invert it before you double the bass. You have to double the right scale degree. Like this, so 2 times this one here. It really matters that you invert first and then double that bass. That means you have to have 2 Ds. Now, if you try to place the D here, you can see right away that this is not going to work because that's just too big a leap. And then the F, where would you put that? I mean, you would probably put it here then, right? Here we're in the situation again. If you see this sort of scenario where both voices are leaping drastically, switch them around. Try with this here, D, and then F, and then you can see everything lines up. This one is easy. The 6 is taken care of because it's already in there. You need an A, and you need a sort of an A would be 4 up from this note here. That's E, E, F, F sharp, G sharp, and A. So an A is there. Where is the nearest A? If I try it here, you can see that that's going to lead down. That's no good. A, good. That one is going to work, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And then the this one here, you would then have to doctor something because here you have parallel octaves, right? But you can double in a different way. All this is going to be taken care of in the way that the assignment is written out. Okay, so that's level 1. This you must be able to do in order to pass the final test. What if you flunk out at the final, the theory final? Well, if you got a good result in your midterm, It doesn't mean that if you flunk out of the final that you're going to flunk the course. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you flunked the exam. We've all been there. I've flunked exams. I mean, not many of them, but because I sort of wised up after a while and said, okay, this is my profession. I want to take pride in knowing what I'm doing. So I made sure that I knew what I was doing. And I think you should do the same, actually. And some of you indeed do. And that's all very good. If I were to write out the whole thing, let's say I don't have any of this stuff here. Let's say I only have this. I only have a key. And I have a few guidelines. I have the outline of my model here, my phrase model, and I have the analytical symbols. The first thing I do is to outline my base. So outline the base, not just for the first chord and then start stacking up, because you're not going to be able to put this jigsaw puzzle together if you do it that way. I promise you, you're not going to be able to do that. Outline the base. 1 in A is A. 7 diminished sixth. If you look at this by numbers, let's say 7 plus 2. That is scale degree 9, if you like, or 1 more than 8, which is 1. So that's scale degree 2, right? You're going to end up, do you understand that? This is not math. I know that some people say, oh, you know, music theory is like math. Well, I'm just adding and subtracting. So if you call that math, then sure. It's like math, but it's not, you really don't have to be a genius to do this. Trust me, because I'm not a genius. I can add 7 plus 2, get 9, and understand that that's the same as scale degree 2. Right? That's not difficult. You just have to know what you're doing. You have to be able to put up the right equation or the right sort of mental arithmetic, and add the right numbers up and understand what they mean. So scale degree 2, you've also seen this quite a few times. So if everything fails, then you just intuitively know, okay, that's the one that does this 1, 2, 3, right? And you understand that scale degree 4 are the chords that we have examined the whole semester that constitute the predominance. Scale degree 4 in the key of A would be A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. And then anything to do with a cadential 6/4 chord or the dominant has to do with scale degree 5. So that would be 5 and then repeated, because we have a little bit of a dominant expansion, if you like, or decorated dominant. That's very often the way you hear it expressed, that the cadential 6/4 chord is a decoration of the dominant 7 chord. And then you go back to 1 here. So outline that entire line from start to finish. Do not start stacking chords. You have to know what the chords are, of course. You have to know that a 1 chord in the key of A is an A chord. But all you really have to know is the root of that chord to get the bass in. You also have to understand what kind of third scale degree we have. In minor, it will be the lower third scale degree. And scale degree 4 is the same both in major and minor. That's why we can combine all these different, predominance, the 7 different predominants that we sort of lump together in the same category. We can study them at the same time because they work in both major and minor in the style that we today call gospel music, because that's the way gospel works. The unique thing about gospel is really not so much the way that the harmonies work, but the blend of harmonies borrowed from the minor mode into the major mode and vice versa. That's if one were to say, what is gospel music? Well, in terms of the harmonic content, it is really that, more than anything else. And then they use a certain chords at this point here. Very often you would have a 7th chord as your tonic, and that goes for both here, obviously. But in all these harmonic functions that we are studying, it will be the same in most styles of tonal music. We don't need to really start from day 1 and work our way through. And sometime in the fifth semester, we'll need jazz and gospel because, you know, it's a fairly recent style. And there's like maybe 1,500 years of harmonic practice evolving to that point. But I think that's probably not the right way to go about it, because most students are not hanging on for 5 semesters until they get to what they're really interested in. And then the next thing, so that's point number 1 here. First order of business, right? I'm going to bracket that. Second order of business is to write in the soprano. You reverse these two. You see A here and C here. So you're doing that voice exchange, remember that? And then you fill in the gap in the middle. And depending on what predominant I'm asking for here, if I'm asking for a triad, this one here is a triad, right? You are now doing 8, 8, 7, and again the leading tone. That is just the scale degree 7. Just knock any, for the purpose of this exam, knock out any other scale degree 7 than the leading tone, which is G sharp. You see? The cadence that goes along with a triad is the 8, 7, 8 formula. We've studied these in isolation. And then you simply just, if you have a common tone, which you do, this one here in the key of, or sometimes you do, if you have a 7th chord, you have a common tone, but here you can see that this one here just skips up a little up to the flat 2nd scale degree, like that, and then you fill in the blanks. But that's, you outline the entire soprano as your 2nd mode of operation, and 3, fill in the alto. The tenor is the last voice to go in. And when I see 3rd stackers, you understand that if you're stacking from the bass, the tenor is the 2nd note to go in, and that doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. The 2 most important voices for our purposes here is the bass, or are the bass and the soprano taken together. If you can get these 2 to work out, you're 90% there, because now the assignment is simply just to fill in the inner voices in close position. And here we can really move fast, right? We're in the key of. And now I just need my bass, and whatever note is not represented in the 3 voices here. By the way, if you just take a snapshot of this, if you're accompanying and you're not a keyboard major, this is the way to accompany. 2 voices in your right hand, 1 voice in the bass. Forget about the tenor. It doesn't do anything really other than filling in the sound. That's what the tenor does in most harmonic practice. So you see, okay, I've got an A, I've got another A, I've got a C, here's an E. That goes in there. Harmonic function, I spelled my chord, you know, here it is. Doesn't matter really if it's in first inversion, because for the content of the notes, I can see I've got a B, I've got a G sharp, and I've got another B, so the D goes in here. And then this one again, I've got a C, I've got an A, I've got 2 A's. E is the missing note. And now we may want to say, okay, so here we got to, let me just erase this for a second. We may put it back again. What I'm going to say is the first inversion chord, right? So I've got a B flat. We really should be doubling the B flat if we can. If not, what kind of chord is it? Well, it's a B flat major triad. So B flat, D, and F. Okay, what I got? I got the D already, the F, and then I got to double the D, right? So here's the F, and here's the D that is doubled. And now we can see that everything works out this way, that we're going now in contrary motion as we're aiming to do. It's all about placing these and having a good system in place to be able to do this really fast. And here, we've doubled the bass already. That's the octave. I got the 4 already. I need a C here, right? So in A minor, yes, C, and then B, and then A. And you'll see that to go from a full root position dominant 7 chord to a root position tonic, you are most often, you're most often skipping the 5th in the chord. It is simply just easier to write that way. You could, if, let's say, if one of the voices here was taking the resolution of a tendency tone, you could squeeze in a 5th in the chord, but it's not needed. So here we see we have an incomplete tonic with a root, another root, a 3rd root, and then just a 3rd. So a 3rd you absolutely must have. But this is the full gamut. This is so the 4th voice to go in, the last voice to go in is the tenor. And it simply just fills in all the gaps that are left in harmonic functions of all of it. These are the 2 levels. And then there's going to be an analysis example where I'm just going to say, okay, what is the name of this chord that I used here? And I'm just going to bracket it. Let's say I'm just doing this. So that will be your big question mark here. Name this chord. It's one of 2. It's either 7 diminished 6 or it's a partial 6/4 chord. And then there will be a question here of name that chord, and the same idea, right? That you'll just have an open bracket here. And so now we're practicing a bit of analysis. And let's say I might make a mistake in this one here and say, what is the mistake in the cadential 6/4 chord?
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah.
On the last chord, you have 3 A's on that last chord. So
Yeah, what about it?
I don't know if that's what we're supposed to have.
What's that?
I didn't really hear if that's okay to have.
Okay, I said that if you're going from a root position dominant 7 chord to a root position tonic, most often you will skip the 5th in that chord.
Okay.
So complete to incomplete, or if you're missing a note in this one here, incomplete to complete. That's not something that I've invented. That's just the way part writing's been done since about 1450. And as I said, you can get the 5th in if you make one of the voices do some leap up to the 5th, but it's not needed. You really don't need a 5th in a chord. Yeah, this is called an 8/3 chord, if you want to know. It's considered a contrapuntal or a counterpoint chord, basically, right? Because of the way the voices are progressing, that they smoothly go into this. You only need a 3rd in the chord, a root and a 3rd. That's basically what you need. And jazz players have a little rule of thumb where you say you need a 3rd and a 7th in a chord, right? And they think that they have invented that. That's nothing new. I mean, that's been basically described since Palestrina in 1550. Go, Kevin.
Would it be wrong if I would have put the leading tone, the D, up to an E, and then the B up to a C on the last chord? Like, would that violate any voice reading?
No, I mean, if you, what I'm saying here is that if you see a triad here, right, then this pattern here works best in this for the soprano. There's nothing wrong. You can do anything you want, right? I'm just trying to make everyone able to pass this test with a bare minimum of effort, right? So this is the easiest way to do it. It's not the only way. And if you want to go to town on it, I mean, a guy like you or Joel or Thalia or whoever is, and several guys, I mean, you guys may think that you're unique, but you're not. The evening section, I have several people who already have music degrees who are fairly fantastic at this stuff here. And they're just redoing their degree for whatever reason. I'm not really quite sure, but what I'm saying is that if you guys want to go to town and show me, how much you can do, just do it. But don't fall in the water though, because there's no need to do it. Right? Do you understand? It's not a question of this. This shouldn't be about showing off, right? I mean, we're not asking for genius. We're asking for competence. That's a phrase that I've used a lot in the past. But I think it's important to understand that we're not training music theory majors here. That's really not what I'm doing. I'm making people able to pass undergraduate theory and entrance to grad school, so that people can actually pass out of these courses. They don't need to be bothered with them again, right? It's really only if you're working in the church, this is your bread and butter. Because you can find any number of people who can play a lot of, sort of gospel cliches on the bass or the keyboard often, or the guitar or whatever. Rarely on the guitar actually, but on the keyboard for sure. You can find a lot of people who can do that, and you'll find any number of singers who can sing in that style. And that's great, that's fantastic, but you're not going to stand out in the crowd unless you have some other dimension to your musicianship. And trust me, there are plenty of people out there with music degrees as well, right? You've got to stand out. And this is the aspect that most performers do not catch up on. They simply don't want to be bothered with this, because unless you have a kindly teacher who breaks it down and say, this is the sort of bare bones minimum that you need to do, you're going to often, as I did, struggle with it, and you have to devise your own way of doing it. And there's no need to do that. There are people who sort of broken this down. I mean, other performers who sort of found good ways of doing it. But if you feel like stretching out, Kevin, or somebody else, then do that. Just make sure that you can also do the standard way that really does work 10 out of 10 times. That's important as well, right? There was, I don't know if you know the cartoon strip, Beetle Bailey, about the army. So there's this character, Sarge, who's very strong, of course. And when he plays golf, I mean, he can tee off and hit the ball 400 yards out from his tee shot, which is very impressive. That's sort of pro level golf playing. The only problem is that when he gets to the green, where you need a little putt, of 10 yards or something like that, he can only hit the ball 400 yards. So that obviously doesn't work. You have to do the right thing at the right moment. And all I'm asking here is competence. I'm not asking for genius. This is not composition class, etc. I keep saying this. This is just a study in voice leading, basically. The chords, you can all do this. I mean, the chords you can all spell, every single one of you. What some of you can't do yet is that you start stacking them from the bottom, as you did in basic theory or in theory 1. That's a problem, because that's not what we're studying at this point. At this point, we're studying voice leading, which is the connection of all these chords. And if you take a step back and just look at this board, I know plenty of people who would be, mighty intimidated, in fact, by looking at all this, because there's a lot of detail here. But as you can see, it's not very difficult if you know what goes in first. It's simply it's like tying your shoelaces, right? If you do it the wrong way, it's going to be very difficult. Or if you have a child, for instance, or let's say a young friend who is tying his tie for the first time. If you're trying to do that from the other side, it's very difficult. It's almost impossible. Not because it's difficult to tie a tie or tie a shoelace, but doing it for a child, for instance, from another angle turns out to be difficult. If you want to know what I'm talking about, try to brush your teeth tonight with your left hand if you're right-handed. And you'll know that it feels very awkward. Or if you're a guitarist, try to switch your guitar around or grab a left-handed guitar and then try to play that one. It's very difficult, right? It's not that you don't know how to do it. It's just that all of a sudden this is difficult. So what I'm asking for is competence, and then show off your mighty skills if you have them, and God bless you if you do. You're not gonna fail, but I'm just saying that simple does the trick. All right, we're good? Okay, so I'm gonna hammer you again and again this week, next week, and then the week after that, around the 15th. What is it, 15th? Let me just check in. 15th and 16th. Yes, that will be Tuesday and Wednesday. So 15 and 16 December, we'll do finals and then clean up whatever needs to be cleaned up after that. Our grades, I think, have to be in very soon after. I think it's actually the 18th that they have to be in. So I just want to leave a little bit of a gap in case we need to go into triage mode. There's never been a semester where that hasn't been the case. So I don't expect this semester to be any different. This semester is particularly tricky anyway, because we're all tired of this, all these ways that we have to do things. It's just more complicated. I mean, I'm sure that you all have gotten used to the mask. I certainly have. I mean, I just put it on and I forget to take it off even, because it just feels like a natural extension of my body at this point. You know, when you're among other people, and I don't know about you, but I have a little alcohol bottle here. I only touch things with my left hand, and in my right hand I have this guy that gets a little spritz because I don't want to call it. I already had COVID, by the way, so I know what that's like. It's no fun, but it's not a death sentence either, not for a young healthy person. But I don't want to be the source of spread. Do you understand? And if we all think like that, I think things will go away eventually. Vaccine or not, we'll see what we get. Okay, so that's off my soapbox, end of sermon, and have a good day. Yeah? Any questions? We're good? All right, cool. See you later.